To our interview today. Again, you can check the slide that is in front of you now to look at Dr. Trover's very impressive pedigree and lineage. She is a dear friend. She's been an advocate for education, an educator, a teacher, an administrator, and again, a statewide and national advocate for teacher training in the state of Illinois and across the country. And Marlise, I want to welcome you to the recording. Thank you so much for participating with us for the benefit of our students today.
Thank you for asking me.
We want to start out again in sort of this linear fashion that we were discussing previously, Marlise. I want to start to get a ground level viewing, sort of a bottom up view of what a student is like here in a small rural community school in southernmost Illinois. What are the students like? What are some of the challenges that they face literally before they get into the door of the school?
Well, their homes are very far apart and they have to ride bus transportation for kind of a long way to get to the school. Most of the small rural schools in this area are a combination of several townships. And the school that I actually was a superintendent of, Vienna High School, I can tell you that it was 300 square miles in distance. So several different little communities are represented. And what that does is it makes it really hard for kids without transportation to get back for activities and those kind of things, even before the COVID when we didn't have as much, now that we don't have the activities. But there's a transportation issue. There's also a connectivity issue that the students face to do their computers and their devices. And even if and then with the connectivity, a lot of the communities don't have the connectivity, and then the parents might not have the money to pay for it if they did. So that's a kind of a double sorted kind of situation. They don't have access to the museums. They don't have access to the free public informational places that a larger community would have. And so that kind of limits them. They do get involved in some sports activities, but those are mostly the general team kind of sports where art and music and foreign language would be something that they would not have much access to
Right.
in a small rural high school.
Right. And what would you say the general sort of socioeconomic status of most of the students? Are we talking about, high end families, high income families, middle income, lower middle? What would your guess be?
Meridian Meridian is a unit district. That means it's pre-K 12, and it's 100% free and reduced lunch. That means every child, because there's such a high rate of low income, that every child gets their lunches and their materials and things free. So absolutely, that's a huge challenge for them.
Right.
Uh,
And
Vienna High School is about maybe 75% low income.
right. And these are communities around us. And just for the benefit of everyone else, Meridian is where you are currently serving as, if I'm not mistaken, it's the English and literature teacher, correct?
Yes, language arts, and we're trying to do some publications this year because they didn't
Great.
have a newspaper. Those kind of things they didn't have, which that's another thing that a larger school would have much more opportunities to be involved in is the publications pieces.
Right. And again, I want to make sure that our students understand that if you'll allow me to say, you've had a full career, not only as a teacher, as an administrator, as a superintendent, but also as a college instructor, preparing teachers and what have you. And here as you and I both are in the latter days of our careers, you have found yourself back in the classroom. Now, what prompted that? Why do that?
Well, there is a huge national teacher shortage, but that teacher shortage is even more progressed in the rural areas. And my husband, who was a driver's ed health teacher before he became a superintendent and a principal, was asked by the superintendent at Meridian to come and help him do driver's ed. Well, I was there at the time, and the guidance counselor was a Vienna high school teacher at one time, and while Bobby was getting his books, the gentleman asked me, the guidance counselor, they couldn't find an English teacher in a high school. They couldn't find an English teacher. So he asked me, he said he knew my content area was language arts. And so last year I taught English 1 and English 2.
Hmm. And so basically they snuck up on you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, by the way, what are you doing? Well, hey, we got this thing. Well, again, I just want to thank you for your service because again, I know what it takes to be in the classroom. I know what it's like to have to work in an area like that and work with students that again are that don't have every possible opportunity to see themselves through. And again, I wanted to just follow up on one thing you said about this idea of free and reduced lunch. Again, a lot of our students may not realize that I think the threshold is something around, isn't it like 200% of the poverty level? That if you're below that, then and again, that's not a lot of money for the family. I think that would only be in the mid $40,000 range. If you're below that, then you would qualify,
That's
for
family. It's lower
yeah,
than
that's for the family. I mean, that's the whole family of four, and I think it's again what might be considered a modest income. It puts you in that category. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So in terms of the students now, so we kind of get a picture that again, these are mostly kids coming from rural settings or small communities. They come either by car, they're having to be driven to school, someone's driving them to school, or they're riding the school bus. There's some considerable distance and the time that it takes to get there and back. That limits their ability for after school programming because the bus can afford to ride one time. I can remember that. I remember that speech. Look, we can drive that bus one time a day, there and back. And so they can't really have buses that go out after hours to deliver kids out and things of that nature. So their ability to participate in after school activities, things like sports and stuff like that, again, are limited by the access they have and the availability they have of transportation.
So I agree there. With at Meridian, there's nobody that walks to school. In
No,
a larger city, you would be blocks from school, or you were in the same city block or something. No one walks to Meridian
no.
because there wouldn't be any sidewalks. It's just like out in the country in the
Yep,
fields where the
yep. It's in the middle of a corn. Well, not in the middle of a cornfield, but it's in the field. That's for sure. Right by the interstate. Yeah. Now, or at least I want to take our thinking. Now we've kind of described the student. Now I want to try to talk about the place and the facility and the kind of the culture, if you will, of what a small rural school looks like in Illinois. By the way, how many students in total would you say attend Meridian?
about 400.
And that's from first grade to
Yes.
first to 12. I mean K
High
through
school,
12.
yeah, our high school would have about a less than 150.
Okay. So 50 50 in a graduating class would be a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just to kind of get a scope of the size for everybody to be thinking about. Um, again, Meridian, again, we'll be showing a picture of the location of the school and some photographs of the school as we're talking here. Again, it's not it's not an old building per se.
Well,
It's modernistic, but it just went through a big remodeling, didn't it?
well, let me kind of discuss a little bit the facility of Meridian. It is a unit district. There's an elementary, and because of mold issues, about maybe 5, 10, maybe about 10 years ago,
Mhm,
they rebuilt the whole elementary side.
mhm.
But now the high school side was built in the 50s, and they are trying to do some renovation with windows and roofs and those kind of things. But one of the things about small rural schools, because of their facilities piece, is they're really not wired for the technology, and there's a lot of makeshift stuff being done. And for example, the in the high school side, air conditioning is a window unit.
Mhm.
Uh, and not we're very glad to have those window units, but on the new side where it's built, of course, it's a more central air kind of situation. So we talk about circulation of air and those kind of things, what we just really generally expect in a facility of a school. We're having to make do with what we have and add ons as things break down and whatever.
Yeah, and again that I can remember working in another local public school here where the teacher was very, it was very difficult to teach because in the 1950s, when the building was built, there weren't a lot of electrical appliances used in
Yes.
classrooms. And so the room, which was about a 30 by 40 space, about 650 square feet or something, had two outlets, one in the front and one in the back, and that was it. I mean, that was the totality of it. So when you look at trying to teach, in modern ways with modern equipment today, those older facilities really, really, really don't stack up and really don't help us well. Uh, Another thing about just the place based, and again, I want to make sure students get a good sense of this. When you talk about a unit school district, again, that means that this is the school for a very large area.
Mhm.
It could be half or three quarters of the county, perhaps,
Right.
where all of the students are aggregated into this one place. And so that also means that this is the central place where kids get their lunch and many times their breakfast.
Mhm.
And again, and it's a good thing for that. Marlies, how do you think that's been affected now with the pandemic? How's the nutritional aspect, especially here in Illinois? We've kind of been off and back on again. How do you think that's played out within the context of local schools here?
Since last March, we've been taking to students who, in March, of course, we were off for a couple of months with the beginning of the pandemic. And our school, because it's so important in that I said we were free lunch, so important that we provide that food that the teacher aides and some of the teachers actually rode the bus and delivered meals, and they would give them enough so it would be 2 days, and it would be those kind of items that they could transport. So the first, this spring they were delivered. Through the summer they delivered a little bit too because of the people and losing their jobs and the fragility of the economy there, the
Mm,
fragility of the food service, and even today, if we were about 30% remote, 70% in school, we do still try to provide to some of those remote kids um, at a pickup point or whatever, a place where they can get it, a common place, or deliver it to their house. So we're sending food to these children who absolutely need it.
right. Now, Meridian is located in, is it in Alexander County or is it in Pulaski? Right. I'm going to ask you this question. This is not a trick question because I think I know the answer, but I hope that you can tell me. Now, we're talking about an entire county
Yes,
in Southern Illinois. How many grocery stores are in Pulaski County?
there may be one.
Maybe one, right? And that would be down um, in either in Ullen. Is it might it be in Ullen or is it?
City. Now there are a few like Dollar General stores, but to find fruits and vegetables, it's really a sad situation.
Right,
So,
and which begs even more the question of why the school is such an important
yeah,
focal point for good nutrition for students as well. One other thing about students, tell me about the availability of what I will call healthcare for students. Does the school have a school nurse, and is she available to help with issues around healthcare at the school?
we're blessed to have a school nurse, and she's stayed there for several years. She's past 70, if you can understand my point, because they might not be able to find another school nurse. So she's dedicated herself to that calling. The healthcare, they would probably have to go to Alexander County to a clinic.
Hmm.
Uh, Very difficult. Most of the students are on Medicaid, so it's really hard for them to get into a doctor if they could even find one. Um, it's definitely a challenge, and but we try to do everything we can at the school. I am helping too with the Southern Seven Health Department as kind of a liaison between the schools and the health department because of COVID.
Right.
But I can tell you my information about that. I kind of know that they do go to schools and try to help them get their immunizations and those kind of things.
Right, and that is the public health department
Yes.
working within the context of the school and the school nurse to
Yes.
provide health context. And again, I think I know the answer to this question too, but I will ask you as well. If I, let's say I accidentally, something went wrong and I needed to have medical attention other than what the school nurse could give me, or a clinic, and that happened on the school grounds, where's the nearest hospital to
I
Meridian School?
probably Cape Girardeau, that's in another state,
Yeah,
Missouri, or Anna,
yeah,
that both of those. In the county that I live in and that you live in, Ron, we don't have a hospital.
no, we
Uh,
don't.
that's one of the situations where if you have a heart attack, that is it's a beautiful county to live in, and I don't want to live anywhere else. But having a hospital is definitely a consideration for people when they move here.
Yeah, for you and I, it's 25 miles. Doesn't matter which direction you want to head. It's going to be 25 miles to get to a class A hospital, and there's a couple of small rural hospitals that are still 25 miles away as well. So anyway, for students, then healthcare is still an issue. And again, you're lucky, as you say, to have someone there at the school that can provision that a little bit. Marlise, I'd like to talk now and kind of expand our view and come from a little higher altitude view about schools and the mechanisms here with such a poor county. And I'll use that phrase because again, when you look at the tax base, which is where all the income for schools is derived within the state of Illinois, it all comes from our economic evaluation of the county and the tax base in which the county can provide. There are other sources of funding, of course, that come in from other places, but in such a low resourced community, uh, how can you reach out and really find high quality uh, educators and people who would be willing to come to a small, rural, without question, probably underfunded and isolated school district? How do you attract a teacher or any educational asset to come and be a part of that community?
Well, I think when we talk about school finance in Illinois, we get school finance, we get funds from four different areas, and this is probably, I don't know if this is more than you want to know, but we get state aid, which is our new evidence-based funding model, which provides money. We get the property tax from the local sources, and we get federal money, and that's what you mentioned, you alluded to earlier with the grants. Then we get some flow through money. But what has happened, because the situations on the bigger picture, on the macro level, uh, there are so few people going to teaching, that there's a tremendous shortage in most places, especially for specialty teachers, math and foreign language and those. In the kind of things that we need to have to bring our students to the opportunities that they need.
Hmm.
But even with the extra money that we're getting to get a basic adequacy level for money, we're having a terrible time finding the people to teach those classes. And when you look at facilities, you can kind of get around them. You can make things happen if you've got the people that have the innovation, that are innovative enough to, make things happen. It's such a brain drain that we don't have, to prepare the next generation, that it's going to be a long-term consequence if we can't get people back into education and make it the position to be in. I'm thinking that I feel a little more hopeful now, even though our numbers are lower than they've ever been, because I think students are beginning to understand that that's probably one of the best jobs there is to prepare the next, and most important, to prepare the next generation of people to teach the next generation of people.
Mhm.
So I'm seeing more kids being, looking at it than I have, even though our numbers are the lowest they've ever been.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point that we don't often think about is that um, especially when we think about the job opportunities and the business relevance of those jobs of the future and the future jobs that we're looking at. If we don't have people that can start early on building the STEM knowledge, the language arts knowledge, the capacity to think creatively and to design creatively, if we don't have teachers in the right place at the right time to influence young people at the moment when they need it, at
Mhm.
that right place and time, then we're actually losing out on the ability to let those young people nurture that creative ability and succeed in the jobs that are coming in the future. It's sort of a recumbent thing to think about it, but really it does start at that at an early age, an earlier time where you get exposure to the things that can happen and what's out there. So I think that's a very important thing that often gets very overlooked.
What there are some programs that I mean, people a lot more global than I am are looking at. Educator Rising is a program, a Grow Your Own program, because if we can educate our kids and then they can come back and teach in the schools, that's very important.
Yes, no doubt. Marlise, as we kind of wrap up here in just a second, I want to ask you a couple of maybe philosophical questions, but they're future forward questions. If you could find one thing and that you could say, this not necessarily a magic bullet because we know those aren't there, but if there was one thing that you would emphasize more than anything about trying to work with low resource, low early literacy children, what I mean by that is kids who've not had the best advantage of having high literacy rates or exposure to high literacy, and they're in the situation like we are in here in a rural situation here in Illinois or anywhere, what would be some of the most important things that they would need to get them to a point to where they could succeed going forward?
Well, I may be a little bit off of the topic here, but I think the most important thing is that you alluded to is that you have to know your students. So if you know your students, or if you are aware and it's obvious to you, then you better check it out, because thinking that you know what students need is probably a mistake if you haven't been with those students and you haven't been around them. As I said, I was out of the classroom for 30 years here, and it was quite a learning for me, not just generational, but cultural and ethnicity wise. It was a very important. So we have to know students, and then we have to make sure they understand that we're here to help them and listen to them and ask what they really need, because the comment was made to me, and I've been in education all my life, and when I'm committed to something, I'm pretty committed. But the comment was made to me, well, you won't probably be here after Christmas. And so then I had to kind of prove to them a little different. And I would have only understood that had I been, I was listening to them. So we have to know them. We have to provide opportunities for them. We have to go beyond. We have to be an advocate for people. Even though we've got all that stuff, we have to go beyond to do that. But the first thing you have to do is you have to know these kids, know where they live, know what things that they value, and then you have to go from there.
And that I would assume, Marlise, that's not only if it's in Meridian, but that's whether it's in Uganda, Tajikistan.
Oh,
That
uh,
would be, it wouldn't matter where it was at. That's
yes.
fundamental, knowing the students. Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't matter just low income students. It needs to be the students in New Trier or DuPage County. Those are, so, but
Yeah. The high rent districts here in Illinois. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Now, last question for you. As we look at education as a whole, and we see the various modes in which education is taking place. Again, we're using a mode of education that 10 years ago, you and I would probably never have had the opportunity to use, nor whether might not have even seen it as significantly value added in terms of comparing to other things. But here we are, and we find ourselves here. As communities and as schools look towards trying to improve the overall educational atmosphere and capacities of their communities. Uh, we talked about knowing the student. What does the community or the educational system need to know? What can they do to improve learning and the success of their students in the broadest possible sense?
Well, I'm really concerned about the lack of connection that we have with our students that are all remote. And I think we just continue to have contact with them. There's a whole set of books, distance learning playbooks. One of the gentlemen's writing, it's named Marzano. And he says, this isn't homeschooling, this isn't remote learning, it's crisis learning. So
Mhm.
we're doing the best we can. The connectivity between technology is good to have when you don't have anything else, but it is not the same as having your teacher in your classroom. And we don't know right now, because we're in the crisis, we don't know right now what consequence we're going to have. Now, I'm not saying that the only way you can teach someone is to be in the classroom, but what we have to make sure we know is what do we have to provide in additional opportunities to make it the best thing that it can be. I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think access always has to be, a primary consideration, but then again, there has to be consideration of effectiveness. And access without effectiveness is less than optimal. And I think I'm like you. I think we don't know enough yet to really
Mhm.
judge whether or not what we've been doing is going to be as effective, to be able to know if we are being effective under the circumstances. And I think time will tell. And again, we've got a lot of making up to do. Someone was asking me the other day, I said, they were looking for a part-time job in the summer. They're already thinking about that. And I said, I can tell you what the perfect job would be. I said, if you like working with young people, be a tutor, because there's
Right.
going to be a huge need. There's going to
Yes.
be a huge need for tutoring over the summer to get especially younger children up to grade level where they have not had the chance to do that. And again we could have a whole nother conversation about how moms and dads and aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas have become surrogate teachers at the kitchen table, over the last 6 or 8 months,
Mhm.
simply due to the pandemic. And I've had the chance to help out with a couple of those kindergarten and third grade lessons.
Mhm.
And my hat's off to any kindergarten teacher who's trying to teach 5 and 6 year squirmy little kids, and trying to keep their attention teach during that period of time. It's fascinating to see how effective some of them can be and really are.
Mhm.
Marley, is there any question that I should have asked you that I didn't?
Well, no, great. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Education is something I'm committed to. It's the big picture for me. One thing I'm going to mention, because you stirred me to think about it when your last comment. Uh, America is a shining example of universal accessibility that doesn't matter what nationality you are, what gender you are, what disability you have, or what ability you have. We have universal accessibility, and we've had that for a few years now. I did travel to China and was asked to go to some of the schools there. They had a good program, but everybody wasn't included. So right now, universal accessibility that is very important, and we can't not say that it is. But when you mention that just going to school is not enough, we have to really look at the effectiveness of what we've been doing during the COVID and before and after, because we want to make, as you mentioned about business, the return on investment, the ROI has to be the best we can do with the situation we're in. And we have to continue a conversation to talk about what is the best we can do with the resources and the people we have to deliver them.
Yeah, and I think as our students that'll be viewing this look at their projects and the work that they're doing, I think those are literally words to live by. It can be a great project, it can look good and feel good, and be all shined up and pretty, but is it going to be effective? And how do you know that? And what can you do to make sure or ensure, in the project development phase, and looking at as you roll out your project and understand it more fully, what can you do to ensure the fact that you're being as effective as you can be? I think that's a really important point, Marlis.
One thing that we used to think about, and I didn't think about it until after. A graduation from high school was 13 years if you have kindergarten of seat time. After we started thinking about what is the effectiveness, are the skills that you learn in that period of time, are they going to help you to get a job or after high school or post-secondary? It's no longer seat time. It has to have that. It's accessible. We're all accessible to the seat time, but we have to make sure it's the most effective that we can have. So it's more than seat time.
Yeah, it's more than just showing up, isn't it now?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, Marlise, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I always appreciate our conversations. I want you to know I learn something every time I talk to you. There's
Yeah.
something that I glean from our conversations, and I appreciate you so much. And again, thank you on behalf of our students and the program here. Students, we'll see you soon. And again, I hope you take this segue that we have here, that you make something of it and apply it to your project as it goes forward.
Thank you and blessings for all you're doing. I'm interested in your projects.
Great. Thank you so much, Marlise.